So today is going to be a big session that I'm really excited about. It's also going to be kind of powerful, I think, and talking about some really big subjects, because I'll be talking about my personal story, about my alien abductions and my time in a sex cult. And for those of you who've been following my work for a while and who study with me and meet with me, you know what that's about. But for some of you, it might seem really left field and sort of strange, like, what is she talking about right now? So just a couple of disclaimers. Everything that I'm going to share is essentially my truth. It is things that have been channeled by me over the years as well, as I have been working in the quantum field and working with life force energy. So take it or leave it, take what resonates and leave the rest, please do. Hello, everyone. And for as far as the sex cult is concerned and other things, I hear a lot of the time, people saying, oh, I'm so sorry that that happened to you. And I just want to say, please don't say that. There's no need to say that, because I don't regret being there. It was an incredible experience. My soul chose to be there. And I chose to be there in many ways. And I'll reveal a little bit more about that. Hello, everyone. So lovely to see your faces. Okay, so to me, womb shamanism is all about reclaiming life force energy, right? And making it whole again, making it pristine again, because it's so often distorted and manipulated. I mean, that's essentially the human experience in general. Right? So as we become more whole, we become more clear and more divine. And it's not really just about our bodies. It's also about the life force energy of nature, making that whole again. The life force energy of Gaia, being open to what's happening beyond our third dimensional realm and above, because there's plenty happening there too. So womb shamanism for me is about bringing back all those pieces of yourself, right? And understanding all the things that have made your story so unique and make your medicine so unique. So I've had a ton of training when it comes to life force energy. I started off at the age of 2 with alien abduction, and this went on from the ages of 2 to 9. It was very frequently, actually, and I often had like night terrors, and I had, I would say, quite a difficult childhood because of that. And no one could really ever understand like what was going on and like why I was having such a difficult time, and they chalked it up to me being, maybe a difficult child or a sensitive child. And it was only after many years that I was just really seeking for where, because I had all of the symptoms of someone who'd been sexually abused, and we could never really come to the bottom of it, and even with all the quantum healings and everything, like, they couldn't really get to the bottom of it until finally this truth started to emerge. And I was abducted by the Zetas and Greys, and who were also working with the Syrians, interestingly, because I have Syrian DNA. So, but not all of the abductions. We're talking in the 80s. The Zetas have kind of since quietened down quite a bit, but they were very active then. But not all abductions were malevolent. And so in my case, the abduction was an experiment to understand the human heart, actually, and understand magnetic pull, attraction, gender issues, love, I suppose, like the feeling of ecstasy. And it's absolutely no surprise that I teach this now. So it was sort of written always in the stars, but what happened was I had a lot of implants, predominantly around my heart. And these implants essentially communicated back information, right? So there's a back and forth between myself and these groups of aliens. So I learned a lot about the feeling body, and I can still now channel quite well, very well actually, like how energy moves, right? And how ecstasy, bliss, all those things, how they move in the body. However, I remained very neutral, which is a very interesting thing. So I have this capacity to understand things and see things very quickly, but I remain quite neutral in the face of it. So my work has been to become more human. Because when you have these kinds of manipulations at a very young age, but also for a lot of us who are star seeds and coming in already with a lot of interdimensional DNA, our job, believe it or not, is to become more human, right? So we are learning to be more in our feeling bodies. We're learning to be more connected a lot of the time. Like you see this, especially with people from angelic realms who have more difficulty in embodying. So this has really been my journey. And I'm open to any questions that anyone might have, like around that abduction and how that all works. But I do want to say that it was also a blessing because it opened me up really quickly to my own multidimensional self, which is something that I'm really bringing forth now, like really teaching, because to me, that's the ultimate teacher, is you connecting to your avatar self, to your multidimensional self, knowing who you are in all the dimensions, where you are, what you're doing, because we have an active life. I myself, I am Syrian, predominantly Syrian, Arcturian, Venusian, but I also receive a lot of transmissions and connect a lot to Andromeda and to a higher dimensional 12th dimensional seraphim line. So, we all have this incredible universe within us, right? And that's the real power to tap into. When you tap into that quantum field, I can promise you, you're not going to need any gurus or teachers, right? Because you're just going to know. And that's why I say gone is the age of the gurus and also of teachers, most likely. So anyway, because of these abductions, I'm going to skip the bit in my teenage years, which was, a lot also, but that's maybe for another session. But, lots of cross wires, right, meant that I had a lot of difficult relationships, and I had a very difficult relationship with my body, and I was also very, very numb, which was interesting because I could channel and feel everything, but I myself was numb in my own human experience. And what happens with people who have been sexually abused, sadly, or have had, a difficult time, certain things happen to them, is they're more likely, effectively, to join cults. And because there's something in your system that already resonates with that distortion. That being said, honestly, I can say that it can happen to anyone. So there is, absolutely no shame in that, because it can really happen to anyone. But I'm not going to go into the details, the psychological details. There's, many cult experts out there. You can listen to them, and I'm also not going to point the finger and say names and things like that, because this is really about understanding the energetics behind what these kinds of communities create. Okay, again, from my perspective, from my truth. So I ended up in a cult. Now, I want to say that to this day, I have still some good memories about it. And there are people who I love dearly, who I met there, who are still in my heart. And I believe that I learned a lot there. I learned an incredible amount. I learned how to distinguish all the different flavors of life force energy. I learned how to nurture and grow orgasmic life force energy in my body. And it was my first real experience of shamanically navigating my inner landscape, right? And all the different elemental and cosmic qualities of my body. Right? So this was hugely empowering and powerful. And I still use some of that technology today. It's in a lot of what I share, so I'm grateful for that. On the other hand, what started to emerge was a ton of manipulation, lies, deceit. And when you're working with sexual energy, there's no gray area, right? So it's either black or white. You're either working with it for the light or you're working with it for the dark. So I'm not going to really mince my words there. And we'll never know, I suppose, if the creator of this cult started out with good intentions or whether that changed along the way. But for sure it got bad. And from a quantum perspective, what I believe was happening is that all of this orgasm was being cultivated, which is power, right? It's also a form of power. And it kept being fed straight back into the organization. And I believe that behind the organization was quite a demonic frequency. I've channeled a few negative aliens around that, which I'm not going to disclose right now, but I could feel that there was a lot of dark energy behind that's was feeding off our orgasmic energy and reversing that energy. And that resulted, obviously, in people being re-traumatized and people being drained and, countless things. And we were even often, we couldn't step out of line. And it was an absolute rule that orgasmic energy had to be fed back into the system. So there was no actual individuation and no real freedom. And a lot of the times, these energies are really sneaky. And you can find that, and I'll answer your question in a second, but yeah, these energies are really sneaky. So what happens is, a lot of the time, it can also be behind a veneer of a lot of love. And this is true even for gurus, a lot of love, and a lot of people who say they know better than you. They see you, better than you. And that is a huge red flag. And that is a huge reason why I teach what I teach, so people can discern energies for themselves. You have to be the only person that you trust when it comes to your, intuition and knowing yourself. And because these things happen, like even with a front of like love, which there wasn't actually much. I mean, never felt any. I felt something that could have felt like love, but really it was feeding the system. But yeah, so, whenever you just have to be really aware, because it can be really sneaky and it can look very, very different to how you think it might look. So did I know that it was a sex cult when I joined? Well, in a way, I did, in the sense that a cult in the traditional term is a group of people who are all connected to one thing, right? So we were a community that believed and cultivated the feminine orgasm, right? So there was a vision, there was some beauty to that vision, which I could get behind. And so in a way, it was a group of people that was obviously dedicated to something that's cult, that's very unique, right? But what happens is often, like, once you've gotten into a situation where, again, your boundaries, your earthly and spiritual boundaries are not quite fully strong if you get into these situations a lot of the time. And so once, let's say, you're already in a really weird situation where you're already showing your genitals, right? Or you're already stepping into a situation that is weird per se, then they have you. Then, like, all the doors open, and then nothing seems weird anymore, right? And these are like very, very subtle dynamics. They're very subtle dynamics. And it's essentially, institutionalized narcissism then became pretty much criminal. But by then, things have already gotten out of hand. Now, I was really lucky because, as I said at the beginning, I was able to maintain some kind of neutrality with it. So I could work with energies, I could see what was positive, I could take from it what I needed. And I didn't get fully sucked in because of this neutrality and, like, because of all the things that I could see. So, they would ask me to do really stupid shit, and I just basically wouldn't do it. Like, some of it just felt like incredibly laughable to me. And I could see that it was partly the leader playing out her own trauma and putting that imprint onto us, which is also often the case. But it still traumatized me. So, even with that awareness and even not going, like, fully in, it took me something like 7 years to get rid of the negative imprinting, and it was a really huge job. It was really huge. And there are imprints that just stay on your body in the etheric field around you. And it takes a lot, so, there's quantum healing. Actually, what worked for me as well a lot was like PT, like, pelvic floor work, like actual pelvic floor work, and therapy. There's kind of like a combination of things. But this is also where, like, the womb shamanism developed for me over the years, right? Because I could see into people's wombs and into their etheric field, and I could see these energies that wanted to be transformed or picked out of the field. And to this day, I can see, like, when entities attach to people. And a lot of the time, how do they attach? They attach in sex, through sexual energy, which is why it's important to know, to go into any kind of sexual relationship consciously, right? This is not about keeping yourself pure and clear and never connecting to anyone. It's knowing that you do have that fire inside that can burn and alchemize, and that's how the feminine transforms. But also knowing negative energy, or like feeling negative energy when you see it, and not willingly, go into it. And often when you go into relationships where there is a commitment, a trust, communication, a connection, that doesn't happen. I mean, that does happen, sorry. Like, it happens, sorry, wait. It's you're more protected, and when there's more of a connection, right? Of course, this didn't happen in the cult, because we were exchanging, sexual energy with 3 to 4 people a day in all kinds of different ways. And you can imagine what that did to our systems energetically, And if you could see the stuff in the fourth dimension that was flying around, then it was pretty scary shit, really. So let's see. What does anyone have any questions about that? Like, to me, the reason for having this conversation now today and you know, coming out and saying these things is that if you are someone who, let's say you've been in one of these situations, and doesn't have to have been this extreme, but perhaps you're someone who's had lots of difficult relationships, or you've had sex with someone who has a lot of entities attached with them. And if you have been sleeping with someone who's doing a lot of drugs or drinking, that's most likely the case. If you're someone who's been in a group of people and really sensed intuitively that there was something wrong, no matter how this group of people is presented to you, that you're not still trusting your intuition, that's where womb shamanism comes in. Maybe you felt gaslighted. That's a big one. That can happen a lot. And there's a lot of subtle energies that can happen there. And so, you know, to be able to pick up on all of these things is like really essential. Like, discernment is really essential, not just of earthly energies, but of spiritual energies. And that means that you have to have your earthly energies and boundaries intact, as well as your spiritual energies and power intact. So there's lots of ways that there's a flow of energy that can be corrupted and manipulated. And this flow of energy has been like reversed when it's manipulated, and then it needs to be sort of like re-reversed, you know, it needs to come back into flow in some way, right? My husband and I are in recovery from addiction. Is it likely that there are entities still attached to us? Like, it could be, you know, there's no, and I think it happens to everyone, you know, if that makes sense. I think these are things that just we're all walking around with in so many ways. There are a lot of parasitic energies that get stuck in our fourth dimensional field. There are fourth dimensional parasites, right? That don't look too pretty, but you can imagine they look like real parasites, like they're like insects or parasites that you see in 3D, right? But they're etheric, and they can get stuck in our field, and sometimes those can be siphoning off our energy. And that happens to everyone. But I do find that where people have had maybe a few gaps for a long time, and this happened to me, like gaps where your boundaries aren't great, or where your energy is being siphoned off, is that does leave a big sort of gaping hole for parasites and negative entities to attach to you. So once you do the clearing, it does heal your whole system. And what happens when those sort of more demonic energies actually get right inside the womb space, it sort of creates a kind of personal hell. And then you can start to really trip out and think that you're having like mental disorders, and you know, even if you're very, very open, you might even feel almost like schizophrenic. And so you have to be really careful then again to sort of just try to distinguish and keep it's sort of a process of working on stuff. So you guys know that, maybe not all of you know, but that I work with inner fire, right? So I developed this technology that has you work with your inner fire, which is your own sexual orgasmic energy, to move through your system and cleanse your system, right? Because you have that power to transform things with your sexual energy. But at some point, it becomes a more elevated practice, essentially, where you're connecting to what I call the holy fire or the etheric fire, right? And you're bringing in cosmic life force energy, cosmic kundalini energy, some people call it, to join with yours. And that's so important, that at some point we elevate our practice up to our hearts and then even out into the higher dimensions. And this is something that even in our sexual relations we want to work with, right? Like not just being stuck in the lower centers, but moving all of that energy up to the heart. And that's where the real opening happens. And then you move into your multidimensional aspect. And at that point, you're really in a situation of a feedback loop of receiving and giving life force energy to the universe and to your higher self. And so even in that situation, you want to make sure that your boundaries are clear, that you're only inviting good spirits to work with you, because spirits and entities, good and bad, will be interested in your orgasmic life force energy. They will want to tap into it. They're learning about us, right? They're learning about how we work as human beings, how precious our orgasm is, and our orgasmic life force energy is, because it's so connected to our bodies, which is something that they can't feel fully because they're not in their third dimensional bodies. So it's very interesting. Some of them might want to have an experience through you. So again, imagine if you're going into a sex cult or a group of people practicing sexuality and you're not taught any of this and you don't know this, and you kind of get a sense, but you don't really know where your energy is going, who it's going back to, who's gaining from it. And then the 3D aspect, of course, is like your financing and housing and your like how healthy you feel, and then there's all these other dimensions as well. And so this is really like part of waking up. It's not to scare you, it's just that this is our sexuality is the thing that negative aliens have always tried to siphon off since the beginning of time, since the human experiment began. And it has been a way that they keep us small in our third dimensional selves, right? They keep us locked in to a certain reality. Add to that the fact that like reptilian, draconic energies, they can't get to the fifth dimension, right? You've probably heard this before. So they need our energy to keep feeding, to just kind of, they do it for the pleasure, not for the awakening, right? And so it's stuck in that realm of the lower chakras, and it's just a constant loop because they can't get themselves to any fifth dimensional reality, because that's a dimension of Christ consciousness, of pure light, pure love and light. I never use like using that phrase, but there is an energy there that they're just not welcome into. So they just feed and get their power off us, and it can get really dark. However, part of our awakening is essentially this, right? That we understand that now there are gaps in their, like there are gaps in their system now. We're waking up. We're starting to be like, what the fuck? Like this isn't okay anymore, right? And there is this new light coming through. I received such a strong transmission just at the twin flame portal, the 22-222, such a huge, strong influx of twin flame codes, of unity codes, consciousness. It floored me for a week. These codes are coming through, everyone. Like there is no stopping it. And if you're open to it and you're saying yes, and you're directing your energy towards that higher frequency, this is going to empower you. This is where the true power lies. And so, I invite you all to do this work, to cleanse and clean your fields as much as possible. Again, this is not about becoming pure. I love being human. I've fought hard to be human at this point, and I really love feeling human and feeling food and like sex with all of my body and all of myself, because it is so important that we have that experience. This is not about like, look at me blushing. This is not all about like becoming pure angelic beings. This is about where the human and the divine come together, right? This is our true work, and this is the work of the Magdalene, just to name one path, because the Magdalene is the illuminatrix, right? So she's gonna like take that heat, that fire that's in those lower chakras, in those lower centers, and is going to bring that energy up to illuminate the pineal gland, illuminate the skull and the body, so you can join with your light body. This is what the first Christians were talking about, and it's the heretics, and they're sort of embedded this. This is an ascension technology, essentially, and it's embedded in plain sight in all of the Christian Gnostic texts, and in many other texts around the world, you know, the Tibetan texts, the illumination through the body. But again, it's like, who are you trusting? Where is that energy going? Who's it going? Who is it empowering? Because if you're connected to your avatar self, to your light body, again, you don't need a guru and you don't need a teacher, because you would just know everything. So we're getting there. We're getting there. We're moving up to the fifth dimension. So hopefully these systems are, you know, breaking down. So learning to connect to life force energy is the most precious thing. Discerning your life force energy is the most precious thing. You are full of the cosmos and the elements. So for you to know what elements move in your body, how you're communicating with the dimensions in any given moment, right? To also work on your masculine and feminine, right? It's sort of in a sense, we're moving beyond our masculine and feminine to a genderless society, right? But we can still honor within ourselves our own masculine and feminine, and regardless of our gender, move towards the masculine or feminine of the other, right? This is mastery. This is really mastery. So I'm open to questions about any of that. I've been speaking for a while. And I want to say that we're going to be meeting in Italy at the end of the summer to do a womb shamanism retreat. And I know that some of you might not be able to make it there, but, you know, in which case, you know, don't worry, because I'm going to be teaching this stuff. There's going to be plenty of courses coming up. But I think it's really special to be able to meet together and to receive the transmissions together. There's some things that I only like to share in person, right? Because I like to give the transmission. Thanks, you, Adaj. You know, I like to give the transmission in person, because there's just kind of no substitute for that, even though it still works just the same. But there's a feeling, you know, about coming together. We are going to be spending 4 days in the heart of Tuscany, which is the heart of the Cathar land. So the Magdalene Mary energies flow really, really deep here. It's this incredible place. I counted 9 huge white doves are flying around. You sort of wake up with them in the windowsill in the morning. And it's just, you know, such an incredible place to kind of really have these codes land deeply, deeply in our system. Right? And it is called womb shamanism. However, we're not going to spend 4 days going really deep in our trauma and whatever, you know, the usual womb shamanism, what you might expect of womb healing, which is pretty intense. I believe that we can really help ourselves with transmissions of grace, transmissions of sacred feminine and sacred masculine. And that those transmissions clear the field and they elevate us in a way that does not re-traumatize us, and in a way that we don't have to really sit in our, our ancestral stuff, our past life stuff. That may come up because that may be something you have to clear in the field. You may have to clear something from your Akashic in the field. But I'm going to guide us to go deep the first day, and for us to kind of really connect to the land, and really go deep. And then we're going to go deep and then come up to the light quick. So this is in no way, this is not about spiritually bypassing. Obviously, anyone who knows my work knows that's, not what I do, that I go really, really deep with people. But this is about finding a new way, let's get through this healing in a quicker way. We're quantum beings. We are multi-dimensional beings. These things nowadays can be quick. In some places, you might hit something that's going to feel like really intense, or you might hit something that feels like you have to dig a little bit deeper. But I believe that we can get ourselves out also quick through grace, and just keep working with that holy fire to join with our light bodies. And that is an automatic protection. I sort of see it like the cloak of Mother Mary that comes down in a sort of, diamond shape. If you imagine the shape of how a cloak is depicted, the light body just sitting in our etheric field and allowing us to just merge with our divine while staying in our body, which is the goal, which is like the real work of the Magdalene. And this course is going to be for women, because I wanted us to have this time together. But my work is all about including the masculine being, as you know. And in fact, this isn't really a priestess course in that way. It's open to everyone. It's, whether you do want to hold the lineage of the rose and you do want to be an active priestess in your role in life, or whether you just want to come for healing, or whether you connect to other deities or ascended masters. This is really not just about, the Mary lineage. I myself work with so many, different aspects of myself, as you heard. So I am deeply interested in, welcoming all of our multidimensionalities and our traditions, because that is part of our DNA and our medicine. I simply have a very strong connection to Venusian codes and to the Venusian line and the Syrian line, which is, of course, the lineage of Mary and Jesus. And these Venusian codes, it makes sense, right? Because they're all about love. They're all about, like, how can we connect our hearts and the divinity that we are through our sexual energy. How can we elevate ourselves through our sexual energy? So I'm really excited about this work that's coming through, again, because there's so much energy, so many codes are coming through around the Hieros Gamos and around unity consciousness and unity of the masculine and feminine and moving beyond gender and all of that. So I'm really excited to share more about that work. So yeah, it's going to be a powerful 4 days, and there's going to be incredible music by my divine sisters Vaishnavi and Amy, who are Earth, and they will bring so much mantra and high vibrational music and really heart divine feminine music. So I'm so thrilled to have them there. And let's see. Dash is sharing. Yeah. Yeah, it's really important to listen, to just listen to yourself about, if you have any, so why we practice this, and this is something that I learned at the cult, to be fair. Why do we practice this mastery of life force energy? Because it means that we get like such a visceral yes or no to something in our body, and like we can immediately sense when something is wrong in our field. It's it sort of goes beyond doubt at some point, but it takes a lot of training, right? It's like a muscle that you build. So it takes training, sometimes years of training, to get to the really deep subtleties of it. Yeah, so thank you, Adash, for sharing that. So I think I've pretty much shared everything that I wanted to. So yeah, it's interesting that these conversations are coming up now, because everyone is waking up, right, to reptilian energies, to negative alien energies. There's so much talk about it. Because we're realizing that this is a real thing that's happening, right? That our life force energy is being siphoned off. And so we need to become stronger within ourselves. And at the same time, I absolutely love the work of Dr. Stephen Greer. Like, I highly recommend you listen to his like podcast and like watch his videos on YouTube, because I just think he's doing some incredible work, because he's really reminding us that in actual fact there are so many ET races that are here to help. They won't intervene because of free will, but they're also here to help and to seed that love on the planet, and to just kind of check on us like their children, make sure that we're doing okay. But we have been taught by, the government again, and by the people in power, or probably on the reptilian side, we're being taught, don't listen to that. ETs are here to hurt us. They're here to kill us. They've gone so far as to create UFOs, like man-built UFOs, that do negative things, so that we all believe that it's so that we're all scared, and they can't connect to us with the frequency of love if we're so scared. They're more scared than us of like coming here, and this connection to ETs has existed since the beginning of time. We have to realize this. Like, what do you guys think angels are? Like, it's everywhere. The first Christians, they were in communication with the 12th dimensional angels, who would come down and work with them and teach them things and taught them the light body technology. This is really what it's about. All indigenous cultures were taught by ET races, right? They were, all the different cultures may have been in connection with, different parts of the universe, that they would have been different tools that served a purpose on the lands that they were living in, with the tools that they had at the time. But, this is where gods come from. This is where the idea of gods comes from. These are higher dimensional beings that come to work with us. So we have to wake up to this, because otherwise we can't see the full picture. We can't see that we have that ability within us, just as Jesus said, right? What you will do, what I do, you will do, and even better. Yeah, this is the time. This is the time that we're learning to do that. Everything that Jesus and the Magdalene could do, all of that light body stuff, all of that quantum stuff, they learned it from these higher dimensions. And that technology, again, is embedded in plain sight everywhere you look. Once you see it, you just can't unsee it. So discernment, which ETs are you working with at the moment? And also, as I said before, like with my own experience, yes, there was some trauma there, with my abduction when I was younger. There was some trauma that, again, it just sits in your body. We're human, right? So it's going to take some to work out and to figure it out. And I wish I'd sort of figured it out sooner, that it came from this abduction, but I wasn't ready to know about it. I needed to do like series of, healings and quantum work to sort of really get to the bottom of it. And so there is trauma there, but at the same time, I can stay neutral. I can say in some respect, my soul decided on this connection. The part of me that's here, that incarnated as Carlotta and who had that experience in London when she was little in the 80s, had that experience. But my Venusian self didn't have that experience in some respect. My Andromedan self didn't have that experience. Like there's like everything is, there's a reason for everything, right? So I needed to learn and have that experience because it's such a part of who I am now and what I can share. And I really think that our children are going to be much more aware of this than we are. To them, when they hear the word abduction, it's not going to be like, oh my God, that that you're crazy, or that sounds crazy, or whatever, because the truth is coming out thanks to people like Dr. Stephen Greer. That disclosure has already happened, so it's a no-brainer. There's, it's, no one can say that it's not true anymore. And it's just the how. Don't believe what the government's telling you. Believe what you feel in your heart your connection is to these interdimensional beings. And I believe that our children this is going to be like their daily bread and butter. They're going to be, oh, is that what the Pleiadians did last week? Great. Oh, did we have another ship land here this week? Fantastic. Like, because they're going to be the ones who are on the front line working with these energies, and we're no longer going to be asleep giving our power away to communities, because we've got much bigger work to do. We're talking about the elevation of humankind, of this human experiment working. And that means that we all, those of us who are ready, and I hope, and actually I don't even hope for everyone, because it depends on some people, their experiences to work in the dark. Source doesn't distinguish between dark and light. Our human self distinguishes when it comes to manipulation and deceit and lies and draining, but Source doesn't distinguish between light and dark. And Source understands that you need both as an alchemical container for things to evolve. So there will be some people who stay in the dark and some people who search for the light, or who are just generally like maybe just come from light source, and they just keep tending towards that realm. So there is a sense that some of us will move up to the fifth dimension, and maybe some of us won't. And there's no judgment there. Source didn't have a judgment, but I do think that the ETs care, because they don't want to see our planet explode. So hopefully, if it ever came to that, they would intervene, so they say. So yeah, thanks for joining me here today. So yeah, that's the importance of what we're doing here, is like, let's make this life force energy pristine again. Let's make it clear and clean again, so as many of us as possible, those who want to ascend, can feel that they can become whole again and ascend. Because it's really an awesome experience to work through and walk through this world with your life force energy intact, and with your light body present, right? Shining through your eyes, shining through your heart and your fingertips. And for the feminine, that really is the work to keep that in the body, to gift that through our bodies to our lovers, our children, to our work. It's the medicine that we bring. And for the masculine beings, it's holding that realm of time and space and consciousness and stillness, right? And we need help from ascended beings to get there, because there's only so much we can go on our own. The last piece is grace. So we come to our hearts and we elevate our fire to our hearts and we come into the sacred heart frequency. But in the end, we need the support of those higher dimensional beings to move upwards and to ascend. Right? And the holy fire technology helps with that, because it's that grace that comes in and just lifts us up, opens up the pineal gland, the blue pearl as it was known, and just lifts you up into those higher dimensions to bring you back down and anchor you into your heart, of course. Okay, so I hope to see a lot of you at the end of August in Italy at the retreat. It's going to be such a nourishing and sweet and profound time. You may want to take some time to go to Florence beforehand and check out all the art. I wrote about this recently, that Lorenzo de' Medici was supposedly one of the heretics that commissioned, Michelangelo, Leonardo, and all of these wonderful angelics, as they were called, the angelic artists, to hide the heretic Magdalene line inside the paintings. So there's so many incredible paintings and so much art to visit, and they are a transmission. They are an actual transmission. When you stand in front of those paintings, you receive those light codes. Unsurprisingly, Botticelli with the Venus codes, they're all there. So does anyone have any last questions? Otherwise we will close up. Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much. Yes, Florence, I know. So thank you all so much for being here today and for hearing this and for hearing my story. It's very tender to share, and it's the first time I'm really sharing it publicly. There will be more soon. Please like and subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be doing more of these lives, and I'm going to also be interviewing some more wonderful teachers and people who are really at the forefront, really talking about these cutting edge things, and who can open us up more and more to these higher dimensions. So wishing you a really, really lovely weekend, wherever you are. And I'll see you again soon for next month's live.